What fuels me, beyond my daily coffee of course, is having meaningful conversations with leaders driving change within their communities, innovative startup founders, grassroots change makers. I've come to realize that leaders come in many different forms, and each one inspires me with something new. Come and join me, explore life-changing moments, and look at the mindsets shaping leadership today. Let's navigate the journey of growth and transformation together. In today's episode, we're joined by someone who's been a quiet but powerful force behind Southeast Asia's startup ecosystem success. Will Klippgen is a serial investor and the co-founder of Cocoon Capital, a venture fund that has backed some of the region's most promising early-stage startups. Before that, he was a founder himself. He has spent the last 2 decades shaping the startup ecosystem in Asia, not just with capital value, but with steep mentorship and conviction. Now retired, Will brings a thoughtful lens on leadership that you don't want to miss. Let's dive into this episode. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Amazing.
Big pleasure.
So I'm going to tell the audience something. So I met you a few months ago, full of energy, optimism, working with the startups. I did not expect that you were retired, but you're still keeping all your energy. What's your secret here?
So I run the venture capital fund, Cocoon Capital, right? So when you run the venture fund, it's like a 12-year journey.
That's a long journey.
So whenever you start a new fund, it's like another 12 years into the future, or 13, because you sometimes raise the fund across 2 years. So if I join now the next fund again, I would be done in like 2037. I had thought that this is a good time to step back and work on my existing funds that are still running. So it's like a gradual retirement for VCs. So I still work with 5-6 teams, like multiple times a week. And then of course our portfolio has to sell. That's the thing with investors. You have to invest, that's easy. And then, well, it's not easy, but then you have to sell your investments at some point.
And you exited a few companies, right?
In my personal life, I exited around 9 companies. Cocoon, we have one big full exit last week. We actually have several partial exits, but that's still ongoing, right? Because our portfolio is now 33 companies growing.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the retirement first because that was impressive for me. Let's go back a little bit about your journey. 27 years as VC, founder, investor, venture capitalist. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It's easy to go back in time and look at, why I did certain things. Actually, I would say I didn't really plan my career very carefully. I'm very impressed with young people I meet today who plan very well. I did a lot of things that randomly brought me to the right place at the right time. So I got a scholarship at the right time. I came to Silicon Valley after my studies in the US as a Fulbright scholarship. And I was in Silicon Valley during the dot-com boom. So my first real job was with that, at that time, biggest search engine in the world before Google, and Microsoft started to do that, which was called Excite. And I was on this core team with the founders, and we grew from like 70 to 700 people in 12 months and expanded to Japan, Germany, UK in those 12 months. So that was kind of my first job. And I saw this explosive growth. I saw how things worked. I saw the problems. I saw the opportunities. So that was an amazing first job.
Probably hard work and lucky, both? You would think so?
Looking back, I could have worked much harder and much smarter. We can talk about that later. But it exposed me to like an environment with lots of smart people from all over the world in that team. And that gave me the idea of the startup that I then went back to Europe and started.
Wow. And you mentioned, when we were talking that exactly in that dot-com wave, you rode it from the west to the east. How did that happen as well? Was it within the Silicon Valley, Europe, or just across the board?
So I didn't really understand that at first. But so what I did was that in the US, so we did a general search engine. Some people called us and said, why don't you make a search only for products? And we couldn't do that. And nobody wanted to do that. And I thought, that's a really good idea. And then I went back to Europe, to my home country, Norway. And when I came back, there were 2 e-commerce stores in Norway. 2 stores online selling products. And then we read this report and we of course saw that, wow, there's going to be thousands of e-commerce stores. It's very hard to find your way. And then we said, why don't we start a comparison site? And there were at that time like a few in the US. So we started, I co-founded then the first price comparison site in Europe that we were able to grow. And we did a search engine only for products with prices and shipping. expanded that across North Europe, merged with our competitor, and sold it to Yahoo in 2004. After the dot-com crash, that we survived because we raised a lot of capital 1 month before the dot-com crash, which was, again, very lucky, right? Because a lot of good people lost everything in the dot-com crash.
What was the decision, or the trigger that you saved cash before the crash?
Oh, we didn't really save cash. We raised it from some hedge funds in the UK in February 2000, March 2000.
And it was just
and
like
dot-com
out
was
of
in
the
April
blue.
2000.
So it's just you raised the cash and then
And then it all crashed. You can't be more lucky than that, right? Because suddenly we were super attractive to be a emerging partner. So then our biggest competitor merged with us. Coming back to your question about the riding this wave. So I think what I realized was that as internet penetration reached a certain level, certain business models become possible. So that's why you saw in the US, which started to have a big mass of users. You saw that the mass market models would work, but also the small niche models would start to work. Therefore, you can kind of predict what would happen in Europe. At that time, I wasn't investing. Then I came to Singapore. I think in Southeast Asia, when I came to Southeast Asia, there was probably 3-4 million people online in the whole of Southeast Asia. And now, as you know, we have between 650 to 700 million people here, where most people are connected in some way to the internet, right? So when I came out here to then, after I sold, or while I sold my company, I saw a lot of different business plans and lots of founders raising cash. But basically, by understanding the penetration of internet access, you could also kind of predict what models would work at what time. And that was an enormous help when you decided where to invest and where not to invest.
And 2 decades in Asia, what made you move from Europe to here?
That was mainly because of family reasons, and I did an MBA in France and Singapore.
Yeah, in Seattle.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, amazing.
So that made me end up here. But then I realized that this was a very good place to then be able to, foresee the market, because it's super difficult to be an investor. There's so many things that go wrong, right? 99 out of 100 startups globally fail. It's a really tough task to be an entrepreneur, but it's also really difficult to be an investor. So if you have some kind of foresight or some kind of realization, or an understanding of how this particular market works, then it's a big advantage.
What I love when I spoke to you as well is you mentor first-time entrepreneurs, early stage startup. What advices do you give them when they come to you for investment or for coaching and mentoring?
So Cocoon Capital, we do pre-seed and seed financing. So before product, sometimes before revenue, definitely before profit. So we are like usually the first investor in the company. So very early stage. What kind of mentoring do we do? We have something called Cocoon Academy. So we take the founders through like 15 different modules. So it's like a mini MBA, but especially for first-time founders, even second-time founders. I think the main advice is not to give up. If you look at a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they're just persistent, right? They actually manage to keep the company going. So one of the questions you would typically ask is, what would you do if the company runs out of cash? And there are like 2 answers to that, right? One category would say, then we go and do something else. Or the other category that said, we don't care, we will keep on working on this idea.
Oh my God.
And you can guess which one I prefer.
It's relentless.
Yeah, so that's something you really would like to see. I think the second thing is that you should really kind of listen to the markets. If you think about 3 kinds of entrepreneurs, right? You have the visionary, you have the tech entrepreneur that has an amazing technology, just invented that you can do this and this with this and that. And then you have a third kind of entrepreneurs that have seen a specific problem that they really care about. I would really invest in the last one.
Really?
And I'm very afraid of the guy with a vision, man or woman, or I'm very afraid of the one with the technology that they just invented.
And why is that?
Because you think that the visionary is the ideal entrepreneur. But I'm not saying you shouldn't be a visionary, but if you're a visionary, sometimes you're very stubborn.
Oh.
And you have a vision that trumps everything. And if you see something in the market that goes against your vision, you still let the vision persist and remain your vision, and you will let the company go under because your vision is more important. And I've seen founders doing that last year.
It's probably ego more than vision.
It's a mix. Everyone has an ego. You have unhealthy and healthy egos. And there's a lot of psychology in this and personality typing and so on. But if your vision for some reason is so important to you, that might come from a lot of unhealthy parts of your mindset. So then you have the tech founder who has this great technology looking for a solution or looking for a problem that they can solve with that technology. That is usually extremely dangerous, and that usually fails. And then you have someone that might come in without a vision, with no technology, no solution, but they know a problem that is really difficult. And one good test of a problem is that if that problem will become even a bigger problem by time. There could be a problem that's already very big, that's fine, but ideally a problem that will grow and accelerate with time. That's what we really like. It could be a boring problem.
But it needs to be solved.
Yeah, it could be a non-visionary founder with no tech, but a really boring, big problem. That's what I think is great.
This is the first time I hear and learn about these three types. Maybe the one with the problem would hire the CTO as the one with the technology.
And the guy with the problem would adapt to the market.
True.
Because they are already caring about the problem of the buyer, because obviously you will sell to buyers with that problem. So there's no ego in that. It's actually the problem of the buyer. It's not really your problem. You're just seeing the problem. You might have felt the problem, like I did when I started my company, which was basically a copy of existing companies, but I saw the problem because I had customers calling me in the US and saying that the problem is that we cannot index our products. So I knew there was a demand for it, and I was lucky that it turned out to be true.
In Cocoon Capital, you have a lot of pitches, right? A lot of founders come to you, they pitch to you. How would you, like, for example, select when a pitch is a great pitch?
Again, that you clearly can articulate the problem, and that the mass of buyers that would like to solve that problem would be able to pay you for it. And then ideally we would like to look at the founding team and hopefully more than one founder, and there should be some complementary skills. To be very, very simple, one founder should be able to build this product that solves the problem, and one of the founders should be able to sell it. We do sometimes have founders that are very good at building but cannot really sell. That's sometimes a challenge. Obviously, if two of them can only sell, that's also a much bigger problem. The ideal setup is basically that you have one commercial and one product-focused founder.
And do you help them, for example, in matching talent? Like you have a founder come in with a problem, he knows how to sell it. As an investor or a VC, you would go and tell him or her, this one is a great CTO that can work.
That's normally not what we do. That's normally more of an accelerator, venture builder.
Oh, fine, yeah.
People like Antler, for example, that
Yes.
would take it at that level. We are usually the next level after you have found your co-founders. We don't really have the capacity. I mean, in the rare case, we would do it, but we are not really an incubator, that kind. So you kind of have to have the team when we come in. But yeah, sometimes there is a single founder, and then sometimes we do say, come back when you have a co-founder. We think this idea is good. And then if they come back later, and we might invest. That has happened.
So going back to decades of career, and the audience are leaders or younger generation aspiring to be leaders, what key values would you recommend for first-time leaders, let's say beyond entrepreneurs or founders, just leaders in general or younger generation aspiring to leadership? You spend 3 decades as a leader. What would you tell your son, for example?
We're all talking about people that have been in corporate life, let's say, or have been working for a long time or starting up. I think the main thing is if you want to be a founder, you have to be willing to do all kinds of things in your business. What happens with people in especially corporate life, or if you work for a big bank, is that you're really narrowing your scope and your interest. When you read an article and it's not relevant to your job scope, you might not even want to read it, or you discard information that has nothing to do with your job scope. That is not that great. You should be super curious and kind of a bit of an all-rounder. I think that's really important. And not be too happy with your niche or your focus. Sometimes you have to focus because you might have a very complicated job that requires that. But that makes you less relevant immediately as an entrepreneur. As a young person, you're naturally inclined to be interested in a lot of different things. So that's why you see that a lot of the groundbreaking companies are started by young people that haven't been kind of damaged by corporate life, or, sorry, no offense to anyone working in corporate, but if you can call it that, because you are kind of already open-minded. That's one thing. The other advice is that we become very comfortable. So we have this Johari window, those 4 quadrants, what you know that you know, which is fine. I know something and I know it. and then what you know that you don't know, that's great. And then you have what you don't know that you know, which is great. It's a hidden ability you have, but you don't know it. But the worst thing is what you don't know that you don't know. And that's usually what's limiting founders that I see in our portfolio, that you refuse to be interested in what you don't know, even if people point it out to you, because you're very comfortable not knowing what you don't know. And that basically is your blind spot. So the smaller number of things that are in that window, the better it is. It's okay to not know something, but you should know you don't know something, because then you can seek guidance, mentorship, you can read up. I have an amazing founder in one of our companies that basically transformed themselves from a salesman to a full-fledged CEO that could explain me what working capital is, for example. So by reading, right, enormous amounts of books, listening to podcasts, asking questions.
That's what we call here growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the
And
values of Microsoft.
Exactly. And you would have other founders with a strong vision and with perhaps a little bit too much of an ego that would never do things like that, because they are good enough as they are.
Or they feel
they feel they're good enough.
There is no episode I would do without talking about AI. And it's been here for 2-3 years. And as an investor in VC, how do you see AI shaping the startups? Are there more startups coming to you with AI? How do you differentiate good products? Is there anything different now with this AI era?
There are always these waves in the startup world, and definitely right now, I know Cocoon sees a lot of agentic AI, for example, that builds on existing or multiple models to solve specific problems. So that's fine. The big question is, will that business survive as the underlying models become better, or will it be eaten up by functionality in the big platforms? That's always the big question, right? How sustainable with time are these ideas? And that's very complicated to know. I have no answer to that, but it's definitely impacting every single company we have. Would be impacted or is already impacted by AI, for sure.
Well, we see it every day in the digital natives and startup team. Everything is about agentic AI and AI solutions. And maybe this year or next year, maybe they will be successful. Will they be successful 10 years from now? We don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows.
I think the most interesting part of AI for me personally is autonomous companies. And people are not really talking much about that now. But you will see in a very short time companies that are run exclusively in the cloud, that have a bank account, that have a social media account, that have a LinkedIn profile, that have an email server, and they operate by themselves. You might have a board of directors or people. Perhaps you have an AI agent that takes a role on the board as well. But between board meetings, the company runs by itself.
Looking forward to that.
Are you sure? I don't know. But that's gonna change a lot of things.
And maybe change our kids' generation and how they will adapt to the AI wave. Any last advice to our audience here?
No, I would say just be curious, be interested, don't be afraid. But if you really want to do a startup, you have to be ready for a lot of hard work, and you have to be ready for that startup not working out. Then you try again and do another startup. Nothing wrong with that. You should just know that it's not a simple journey, and it's not for everyone. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of strain on your mental health. And it's okay if you think that that's not for you. You can try. At various levels. You can do it part-time. You can do it full-time. You can join another startup, for example. Another thing is that if you're really just out of uni, perhaps you should actually work for a well-run company first, or a fast-growing startup first to learn, because there's so many things about running a startup or a business that you don't learn even in business school. I mean, I have an MBA from a reasonably good school. There was so much I didn't learn there, perhaps because I didn't listen so much in class. But there's so much to gain from actually being in a well-run company with procedures and SOPs and, proper plans that you don't really get if you jump from your uni right into a startup.
That is so true. Thank you, Will, for coming to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching.